In today's podcast, we have Colin. Colin has a top 1% podcast in the world. His background is also as a sales coach. Today, we're going to delve into exactly what you need to do in terms of grow your audience with a podcast, whether this is for you, and the sales tips, mindset, and everything involved for you to be as successful as possible in 2026. Before we begin, if you haven't already, please make sure you hit the subscribe button, and now let's get into it. So Colin, with your own podcast, you've done over 330 episodes, which is incredibly impressive. My thing in terms of growing a brand and social media audience has always kind of been brute force volume. Why do you think you've been able to do 330 episodes and be so consistent, and so many people who are watching and listening to this can't?
We always see that stat that gets trotted out. I think Chris Williamson parrots it, so a lot of us listen to it and speak about it, where something like 80% of podcasts don't make it past episode 8, and then of those that make it past episode 21, there's even fewer left standing, like 3% or something like that. So consistency is the goal, and I think from my background in sales and in particular interest in fitness as well, which is how we got connected in the first place back in the My Protein days, it really spoke to me that I can just continue to show up, and you could measurably see your inputs reflecting your outputs in the same way with your body, in the same way with your sales process, the same with the podcast. If you continually show up and you make those weekly or fortnightly, depending on what your frequency and your cadence of release is, if you make those deposits regularly, it's going to add up to something. Now, that something might not be a modern wisdom, and it might not be a value CEO. That's not where I'm at. But I do have a platform now which has grown immensely, got thousands of people listening every week, getting really positively impacted for it. And when I hit the button on going self-employed in July, I had a pipeline of people that wanted to work with me on sales coaching because they've been listening for 5 years or 3 years or whenever they discovered me on the podcast. So I think if you're going to do something, do it well. And I wouldn't have started the podcast if I didn't have the intention of continuing with it. You have to have micro moments of positive feedback and encouragement along the way, but still be really disciplined about just doing the process regardless of how you feel, and just hit that Sunday upload that I've always done since the 1st of April 2020.
So for me, I also think like start with the end in mind. And I think a lot of people, they want to maybe have the massive audience, or they want whatever kind of fame or success or the money that comes from the thing, but they're not like willing to wait. And like my attitude is like, I just don't care. I'll just keep making videos and keep going. And then eventually in 10 years time, or however fucking long it takes, like the thing will pop off. And that's where we actually spoke about something else before this, in terms of you just need positive reinforcements, those glimmers of hope as something working and improvement. And then you can kind of keep going. And the same thing with people with fitness and their business is like, where can you see progress you can lean into and use that as like a positive kind of reinforcement? Do you think the demanded interest in podcasts and long form conversation like this is going to increase with AI and the amount of fake content that's coming out now?
Yeah, definitely. People are more connected than ever, but more lonely than ever. Like, it's all surface level. It's all 30-second reels. It's all short clips that are just blasting your dopamine. People are starving for authenticity, depth, realness, and you only really get that across 40 to 90 minutes, however long a podcast goes for. And I think there's a real value to that. And I think people intrinsically feel like they know you. So last time I was in Dubai on the rooftop at TKMMA training, guy came over and said, "Oh, Colin." I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, I listened to the podcast. I listened to your episode with," I think it was Daniel Priestley. And I said, "Oh, that's amazing." That doesn't happen off the back of a reel. Somebody doesn't say, "Oh, I saw you do that really heavy bench press," or "I saw you take your top off in this gym." But they do say that about something that impacted them on a deeper level, and that comes from a longer form podcast rather than a short snippet. So I think in this AI generated world where we can churn out so much short form in particular, and we were speaking about some of the tools which help us with long form now as well, I think it's your competitive advantage. And I view your content, both LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, podcasts, as digital real estate. And the best time to buy real estate was yesterday. The next best time is today. So if you're in a position where you're considering starting something, start now, commit to it, and the compounding returns will come down the line.
So an interesting thing that I would think about, and I think about this with the way you just explained how long form content works, and you're literally a perfect case study of this. So I see everything in terms of content as assets, and assets produce you income. So if you build the asset, your podcast, YouTube channel, Instagram, fucking TikTok, can be OnlyFans if you want to do that, whatever thing is, like eventually you can monetize the thing if you want to. I think the problem is where a lot of people get disheartened, they make one podcast, one video, one Instagram post, and then they're suddenly not making 100 grand a month and they kind of give up.
Your first podcast will not be great. My first one was really good. I had Chris Williamson on, so that helped. But I had a bit of a predisposition to being quite good at presenting because I'd done a lot of presenting my sales career, a lot of pitching, a lot of communicating. To prep for a discovery meeting with a finance director for a big multinational firm, you have to do a lot of research, which is the same for a podcast. So when I was getting prepped for today, Charlie, I'm binging your content, I'm looking at your socials, I'm reviewing your offering on your website so that we can speak about that in depth. That's the same that you'll be doing if you're a coach for a discovery call with a potential client. You're going to review their type form, you're going to review their information, you're going to have your question set ready. The skills are transferable. And if you can practice those skills in two domains and it pays you both times, then that can be really beneficial too.
So your background is also sales and then obviously podcasting. Do you think you being great at sales helps you from a podcasting aspect, because your ability to communicate, express yourself and get your point across effectively?
There's two strands to that. First of all, yes, the actual recording, I was definitely more ready to podcast, interview people, research for the guest, ask good questions, be willing to sit in silence. A key principle for podcasting. You don't want to go motor mouth mode or show up and throw up, which is obviously a thing that people make mistake in sales. The other element which helped me grow the podcast far faster than I had any right to do was my outbound skill. So booking guests. And in the early days when you don't really have a massive audience, I maybe had 10, 11K on Instagram, but those don't automatically convert from short form content into podcast listeners. Like I think probably 1,000 of them subscribed in the first couple of months, but you had to prove yourself to do so. Yeah. So you do piggyback on your guest audience in the early days when they share it to their story, when they share it to their LinkedIn feed, when they share it to their email list, whatever that looks like. And I've got some ways that I encourage the guests to do that and incentivize that for both of us. But my outbound skill in terms of getting in front of people, whether it was through email, through LinkedIn DM, Instagram DM, whether it was through referral or introduction, my sales skills there really allowed me to have guests on in the first sort of 50 to 100 where you didn't really have thousands of listeners, but you had a compelling way of getting in front of them and the ability to book something, which is their most valuable thing, their time to jump on an hour call with you, because back during the lockdown, it was all remote recordings as well.
The fact that you started this in lockdown and it's still going now is also a testament of like also how much the world has changed. And I think also in terms of consumer behavior in that. So one of the reasons if someone's listening to this and their business is struggling and you've not changed anything the last few years is the way people buy and sell and communicate has completely changed the last 5 years. So I think ChatGPT and AI probably came out 2.5 years ago, roughly maybe. Reels was maybe 4 years ago. So 2020, none of these things existed. And I don't know, I've probably used AI 50 times already today and it's 11:55. So like the reality is, I think from how people's perspective, how they consume things and how they buy has changed so drastically that people aren't kind of keeping up with that. How do you see podcasting and sales changing in the next, say, 5 years with AI and technology?
Podcasting in particular, I think we mentioned it already, people are still going to be starving for authenticity. And I don't think, I hope not anyway, that you're going to churn out an hour podcast that's as good using AI as an actual conversation that you and I would have, because it ebbs and flows. And while you and I roughly know some of the topics we might cover just based on similar interests and making sure we cater for the demographic, we're going to end up in different places because we're going to have a human response, whereas the AI is not going to have that. So I think podcasting will adapt because people will be able to promote it easier with the AI tools for your short form. They'll be able to merge the quality of the content better with some of the tools we were speaking about before we hit record, which we can maybe keep under our hat for anyone that maybe DMs us and asks nicely or shares it to their story as a bit of a way of getting the podcast out there. But podcasting is going to evolve because the quality of production is going to be easier to match the big boys. You maybe not be able to have a studio like Derby CEO, you maybe not be able to have a setup like this, but even with your home setup, you should be able to produce decent quality, and quality will rise to the top as well. I talk sometimes about not fake it till you make it, but be it till you become it. So before my show was ranked top 1% on listen notes through Apple Podcasts and Spotify, I had to act like a top 1% podcaster. So the quality of guests I was getting on, the quality of research and questions I would ask, the quality of the clips and the thumbnails I would put out there, I just had to act like that guy before I became that guy. So it became inevitable. I would eventually become that guy. It might take me 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, however long it took. But you act like in advance. And I think the gap between being able to behave like that and being able to do that in reality is now closed due to the technology we have access to. It's just about utilizing those tools and then adding in that key ingredient, which we've spoken about from the very start, is my consistency of doing so. That's the sort of missing ingredient that no amount of technology, no amount of AIification is going to allow you to do.
So you said something there, which I have a beautiful framework that I like, and it's be, do, have. Yeah. So like, it's so easy to win when you actually just think in that kind of framework. So like same, if you give a fitness analogy of like, okay, you want to get in great shape, okay, I track my food, I'm in a calorie deficit, I work out every day, like you then do the thing and then you eventually have the thing of probably the body you want. The reality of the way most people think is they want to have the thing and then think, oh, okay, when I have the thing, I'll then behave like that person. And the reality is it's the complete opposite of that.
We were speaking before we hit record about an episode that did really well on my show that surprised me in terms of like the sheer numbers it did. And it was with a guy called Rob Begg, who's a big component of non-dual thought. And he exactly speaks about be, do, have. People assume that they have a doing problem, but a lot of the time it's to do with their identity and what they assign themselves as. So we'll give a fitness example because we're on a fitness podcast. Many of your clients that maybe come to you as a fitness coach don't have the identity of somebody that can successfully lose weight because they've never done it before. So they think they have a doing problem in terms of I need to go to the gym more, I need to count my calories more often. But intrinsically at their core, they don't believe that there's somebody that adheres to that. In fact, they probably have the opposite of that. They have negative self-talk. I always cheat on my diet at the weekend. I always miss gym sessions when I'm tired. I always order a takeaway when I'm hungover. I always end up fucking it. I never stick to my New Year's resolutions, whatever it is. If we can go back before that and have like real identity change at who somebody is at their core, and we reinforce their self-talk and their behaviors, then the habits and routines that come thereafter in terms of adherence to a fitness plan or adherence to growing a fitness business and creating content and pushing to get more clients, that becomes better. And we were speaking about self-limiting beliefs before we hit record as well. Many people have a particular level that they have like a comfortability at, like that's the guy that I am. That's how much I spend on ads. That's how many clients I typically take on. That's how many results I get. That's how many holidays I go in a year. That's the type of car I drive. That's the type of house I live in, whatever that looks like. We need to go back and redefine who we intrinsically are as a person. And then the other things, as you say, be comes first. Then we do the things and then we have and we get the outcomes and the outputs.
And ultimately that's just an internal belief system change. And I think in my opinion, the faster way to do that is like the law of exposure. Like if you expose to someone who can completely disrupt the way you think as like a pattern interrupt is the fastest way to do that. And that's also why, like we're obviously recording this in Dubai right now. I think one of the things I see with a lot of people when they come here for the first time, like we had a big event recently with a lot of people came from the US. Some of them had never left America before. So they're like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is insane. So you need those exposures in life, I think, to kind of change your perspective.
Yeah, sometimes we need evidence. So being and becoming is more important, but sometimes we need that positive feedback loop or that exposure, as you say, to actually believe it's possible. So if you're a fitness coach, you want to generate a result for somebody very quickly so that they believe in your methodology. So the fact that like Susan's come to you, she's managed to lose 20 pounds because she was seriously overweight, but she's been training 6 days a week. She's just eating nothing. She's just eating dust and chicken and rice. You're like, I'm going to strip back your number of training days. You're going to do a bit more walking. You're going to count your calories. You're actually going to eat more food, but you're not going to binge. She needs to get a quick result to believe that methodology is correct. So while she didn't become it straight away, you almost proved to her quite quickly. And then we work backwards and be like, your new identity is somebody that trains a little bit less, trains harder during those sessions, takes a more strategic approach to her nutrition that is actually more science-backed rather than just you hardly eating at all and starving yourself. And then we create that identity change, which then leads on to continuous and sort of improvement and change.
So you're known for brain, body, and business. Out of those three, which one do you personally struggle with the most?
Really good question, Charlie. I think brain and body are my strongest, and I think they're the foundations for business success. And going self-employed in the summer, business is the number one thing that I'm not necessarily struggling with, but I'm working on the most, because my habits and my routines and my behaviors and my identity around brain and body are so strong and so inbuilt, and I do so many things that are excellent for that. Business is still relatively new to me. I worked in a corporate career in different sales roles, business development manager, head of business development, sales director, all those different roles for 14 years. So shifting my identity and who I am towards being a self-employed sales coach and consultant is taking some time to get used to. And I would say that's definitely the main area that I wouldn't say struggling, I don't want to use that negative language, but that's the area that I'm working on the most, because I'm still building out my offering, I'm still building out my content strategy, I'm still shaping how I show up and what I deliver for people off the back of that, because there's no set playbook for that. It is a little bit different to fitness coaching, where you maybe have some ideas and you maybe have more role models to look up to. In the UK, I'm looking around, there's probably 2 or 3 guys that I see doing sales coaching on any decent level, and then a lot of the other guys are US based, like the likes of me and Andy Elliott, Grant Cardone, etc. And I believe a lot of the USification of stuff doesn't always work 100% in the UK because we have different buying patterns. Again, we're speaking before we record that personal development in the US is seen as like a regular monthly expense that everyone has. In the UK, fewer and fewer people invest in their self-development. So I'm definitely working on how I position that, how I sell to the UK, how I deliver on that. Even in the time that I've been here, as soon as I landed on Monday, I got a message from an insurance firm that their HR director follows me on LinkedIn. She was like, "Oh, no way you're in Dubai. I've seen you be doing workshops in Glasgow and London. Would you look at doing a workshop for our team?" So people in Dubai compared to the UK are way more inclined to be like, let's just drop however many $1,000 on having him in because I've been watching him online. I think you would have a longer lead time on achieving that in the UK, and people are more willing to invest in themselves in particular jurisdictions. That's not to say we can't be a success in those jurisdictions, but we maybe need to take a slightly different approach or a longer lead time.
Yeah, that's kind of my advice on businesses. Like, you can scale on easy mode or hard mode, and it's kind of, for example, for us, like we run a lot of paid traffic to the North America because Americans will. Okay, so if you give an example, so I dig into statistics. The average American has a credit card limit of $29,000. A British person is $6,000. So their actual purchasing power in terms of like horsepower is so much higher. Let alone their actual psychological buy-in in terms of buying the thing
around
is so
debt
much
as well. They probably
Yeah.
have a different perspective. They're like, that's good debt because I'm going to benefit off the back of that. So if they can drop £20, get more muscular, they know they're going to do better in their job and they're going to feel better about themselves. They're going to get a better relationship. They're like, oh, that's worth the cost. I'll take the pain of a little bit of debt just now that I'll pay off. Whereas in the UK, I think we're a little bit more scarce rather than abundant.
Do you find, obviously you still live in the UK now, and now you've gone kind of self-employed with your own business, that you've had maybe some of that scarcity mindset from other people kind of pushed upon you? Because I know that's something like a lot of people listening to this will struggle with. And I had that when I first started my business of like, what the fuck, you leaving your job? You got all these things here. Like, this is like, you're insane. Da, 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 da.
I was building what I call the parachute and the launch pad for such a long time with the podcast, with my LinkedIn, with my Instagram. The plan was always to go fully self-employed in November. It happened sooner than planned because of a few things happened within the business I was working for with the private equity firms that owned it. But I was very much ready, and I was already starting to align myself and think about myself as a business owner. In my last role, I was sales director for the student accommodation division of the business, and I basically ran the P&L for that business. So I was already effectively a business owner, just within a corporate structure, online to the board of directors and online to the private equity firm that owned it. So I was already thinking that way. In terms of scarcity, I actually didn't tell my parents for the first 2 months of going self-employed, because your parents love you, but they're conservative with a small c, not necessarily politically.
Yeah.
Mine are, as you probably imagine from my views as well. But they want the best for you, and a really well salaried job where you're earning 6 figures in a sales career and you've got a really good reputation in the market, which I did. That's safe. You've got a mortgage to pay for, you've got your car to pay for, you've got the holidays you go on every single year, you've got a particular level of lifestyle you need to maintain. Going self-employed is a risk to that. So I actually waited 2 months from July until the September basically to tell mum and dad that I'd gone self-employed, and I actually brought my Tide statements, screenshots on my phone to show my dad in case he was wanting reassurance about what I'd been able to do. And I don't know if that's the case for everyone, but my parents were actually quite grateful because I didn't want to use bandwidth reassuring them every single day about what I was up to, particularly in the early days where maybe I hadn't had like a 4 or 5 grand invoice come in from a coaching workshop. I wanted to be like, right, I've been going for 2 months. Here's the last 2 months. It's not been a flash in the pan. It's not been a fluke of fact. Here's my pipeline for September, October, November. So that can be helpful from that perspective, because I didn't want to have any sort of nagging thoughts about managing their well-being when I was going through the transition period. In the same way, people that I was working with that were unsure about their future or moaning about their future and considering what they were going to do, I don't really want to take on those conversations as well. And I think I said to you that I came off X for 2 months because politically in the UK, we both know the situation is very, very complex at the moment and pretty negative. I detached from that because I believe you are what you consume. So instead of going on X for half an hour a day and seeing about attacks at migrant hotels or attacks on the tube or women being attacked and things that just make you angry and make you feel a bit powerless, I maybe listen to more Hormozy, I listen to more Modern Wisdom, I listen to more trigonometry, I listen to more stuff that I could plug into that would make me feel a particular kind of way that I could work on the business. Even like on a silly level, I was listening to way more house music, like 120, 140 BPM and just get myself going in the morning, bit of caffeine, bit of nicotine. Sorry, I'm a bit of a snus fiend at the moment. And plugging into those sources made me feel ready to be the guy that I needed to be to get the business off the ground and rip it off the deadlift platform from the start.
And I think that's where too many people are. You're clearly very self-aware, and you're also kind of thinking 2 steps ahead of that. It's like, okay, if I tell my mum and dad, then they could have a negative connotation on this. That negative connotation could throw me off course a bit. Let me just go and smash it for 2 months, and then I can tell them. But that probably also gives you something to work towards, to be like, look what I did.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think I wanted to prove them wrong by any shape of the imagination, but I wanted to prove them and reassure them. And in the early days where you can't reassure them with facts and figures, you're just going on pure vibes and energy and where you're at, and like a CRM that, you know yourself, sometimes a CRM is like a wish list rather than an actual pipeline that you're able to review. But having that satisfaction of being able to go in and reassure them was amazing. And my mum actually totally agreed with me, because she's a bit of a panicker. She would have been like, Colin, I would have been so worried that you'd gone self-employed if you hadn't told me, because most of my big commissions in the furniture role that I was in as a sales director came between July and October, because we would install in student accommodation. You would get paid a month in arrears, so when the students are away over the summer, all the furniture would go in. So I missed out on a lot of that for various circumstances. We'll maybe talk about that offline, or we can talk about it on my show as well, depending. And she would have been worried about that, and that worry would have ended up on my shoulders, and the broadest shoulders carry the heaviest burden, no doubt about that, but I didn't need it. So instead I could put all my bandwidth, all my energy towards the actual thing, which was creating content around the sales coaching, running great discovery calls with inquiries, and then delivering really, really well and getting a load of testimonials. Like every client I worked with for the first 2-3 months has given me a testimonial. That's why when I look at coaches who don't have loads of testimonials in the space they work in, I'm like, what were you doing for your client? Or maybe they don't have a template that they can send out easily and be like, oh, here's what I would like you to give me feedback on, what you learned, what the situation you found yourself in before you worked with me, what your after effect of working with me was, and how did you come out of that? It's so vital that you have social proof. So the social proof that I built in those early months, where I was still charging a fair fee for my service that I was happy with, but maybe not the top fee that I can charge now, because now I've got proof. So your prices can change based on the results you've got.
It's funny what you say about the like reviews and social proof, because the amount of times I say to people like, oh, so do you get many referrals? I'm like, and they're like, no. Okay. So it's like, do you have a system for this? Like, no. It's like, do you ask people? No. It's like, do you think if you incentivize people and ask for referrals, you'll get referrals and you make way more money? And they're like, yes. You're like, do you think you should do that? They're like,
Charlie, that's a good idea. It's brilliant. So you worked with somebody who's in your ideal client avatar, and you do a lot of work with your coaches to make sure they know what that looks like. So if you're a fat loss coach for guys in their early 20s, or guys in their guys who are busy professionals, which is the fucking broadest niche on the planet, which annoys me when I see fitness coaches post that. But if you have that niche and you're working with 5 guys that are in that niche, they will know 5 other guys at least that are in that niche as well. Now, some of them might not be financially qualified, they might not have the same desire to make the change, but they'll know somebody that they can say to the mates they've got a result about. And people love to talk about the fitness transformation. Like if somebody gets a bit jacked and they go on the lads' holiday and they are the one that looks the best at the pool, they get the most attention at the beach club, people are like, how'd you do that? And you'd be like, oh, my coach Jamie, my coach whoever really sorted me out, he was great, you should work with him. That's how easy it is. And so as you say, we can systematize that and make it even easier.
But I think that's where people just don't ask. Just don't ask. Like in even in life, but in sales, like you get what you ask for in life. So if you ask the thing, you tend to get the thing. But I think that's also where people have a massive kind of fear of rejection. With the way the world is changing in terms of technology, we obviously touched on AI. I have my own opinions on this. Do you think AI will ever replace salespeople entirely?
I'm already seeing, and I'm having a conversation on Monday this week that will go out in kind of February time on the podcast with a guy who's very much using like AI SDRs, AI autoresponders, AI like FAQ responders, and AI meeting bookers. And he seems to be doing really well off the back of that. What he's not replacing is the person on the discovery call and the person that's closing. So we have a lot of people that talk about high ticket closing in this world. I've actually done a little bit of that as well. When I went self-employed, I worked for somebody for a day a month just because I knew I could make a killing for him. And I trained his team to close as well. Whereas I think a lot of the closing coaches are these wee like American dweebs that just like
do one course.
Yeah, absolutely bonkers. But let them do the thing. I respect the hustle. So when you see stuff like that, you realize that the actual final transaction is still typically going to be human, because people buy people, not necessarily people they like, but people they trust and they can relate to and they feel supported, listened to and heard by, and then the solution that's been presented to them has been delivered in an empathetic, understanding and convincing way with conviction. I don't think the AI is there just yet, and I think depending on what generation people come from, they will be more or less comfortable dealing with an actual human on the end of a Zoom call when they come to transacting, versus perhaps dealing with what they believe to be an AI robot of some sort, which might intimidate them.
I also think what will happen, so you can actually, I put up a post yesterday and it was a carousel and it was a photo of me and Mike, and I used Gemini to put in like a great white shark in the background. And I thought it was quite funny. And it got flagged as AI on that automatically. So I think the same thing will happen if you have AI phone closers on Zoom. There will be something that says this isn't a real person, this is AI.
There'll be a clue.
And then automatically, subconsciously, the person knows they're not speaking to like an actual human being. And then the trust thing, which people don't buy unless there's trust, is gone. Because then if you're an intelligent person, you're like, okay, well, this robot is trying to manipulate me into buying the thing. It's not, there's no authenticity.
Do you know something that a friend and I were doing for his business? He has ManyChat on his Instagram. Yep. So that, for anyone that's uninitiated, a keyword on a post or a keyword on a reply to a story, they get hit with whatever resource you've agreed to put at the back end. We actually put humorously enough that yes, it's an AI generated message, but here's the link. If you have any questions about what I've just sent you, it'll be me that replies via voice note. And you almost break the wall with the person you're talking to, and you acknowledge that I've actually put some AI in here to make this efficient, so you get the guide really quickly, but I'm a real person, so if you do want to come back to me and ask something else, it's me that's going to reply. It's not like my Filipino VA, it's not somebody else, it's going to be me that replies, and you'll get a voice note. And again, I'm big on time management, but time boxing your calendar to reply to DMs properly is something that can be very, very helpful. And from a time management perspective, I do that typically when I'm out for a walk, or I will use instagram.com/direct/inbox on my laptop, and that includes the voice note feature as well, so you can actually be quite specific, because when you're on your phone, your chimp brain screams and tries to get you across to the videos and the stories and whatever, all the shit that's going to be a doom scroll time sink, whereas if you're on the laptop, you're not going to end up looking at stories or profiles, you're just purely going to deal with DM as well, and you can bring that human element which many people are starving for.
So you mentioned there something that's, in my opinion, we've got more tools and more things in our advantage than ever before to build a successful business, but there's more things trying to steal our attention than ever before. Is there anything you specifically do to try and stop that happening? Like you kind of shared one touch point.
Yeah, it was funny. My copywriter was helping me build some entry-level products to work with me rather than my one-to-one coaching. So we built out a LinkedIn guide for optimizing and selling LinkedIn, DMs, templates, all that sort of stuff. But we also built a peak productivity blueprint, because anyone that has followed me for long enough knows that I juggled a 6-figure sales career, building the podcast, a social life, having a good physique for where I'm at as well. So productivity and time management is a really, really, really big thing for me. So one of the things that we built was the productivity blueprint, and I shared within that so many different things, and we'll talk about some of those just now. I'd love to give some free value, but things like app blockers at key times. So on your laptop, that could be cold turkey. On your phone, it can be Opal. Again, I just use the free versions of that as well, and it means that when you time box and you allocate your diary towards a particular task, you don't get sucked out of it by something that's not urgent, not important, or seems urgent but isn't important. And that's really key as well. And you can use an Eisenhower matrix where you block out which of your tasks are the most important across the day. I have a 3 focus lists at the start of the day, and I have gratitude journaled and done different things in the past like that. But my main thing that I do at the start of the day before I go for my walk in the morning is I will build out my 3 key focuses for the day, and I know what good looks like by the end of the day. One of my biggest challenges with people is they don't know what a good day looks like. So how can you possibly sit down and feel like, oh, that went well today, if you don't understand what your intentions are at the start? And your intentions at the start, before you've looked at your phone, before you've looked at the news, before you've looked at your social media, because that's when you're clearest in the morning, particularly from a hormonal level as well. So having that at the start of the day, when I'll typically be having water, electrolytes, my supplements, just get myself ready for the day ahead, I'll write out my 3 intentions. And those are, if we think about a big glass jar, those are the big rocks that we put in there first, and then all the different little rocks and sand and shit that ends up filling up your day and filling up the entire jar, that comes afterwards, only after we prioritize the 3 big rocks.
So what you said there is fascinating. So I do a very similar thing. It's Steve Jobs calls it signal and noise. So like signal is like the big things you need to actually kind of need, move the needle. The noise is the other kind of bullshit of like, oh, I need to post my Instagram stories or whatever it is. The problem what I see most people make is that okay, my big three things there is like, oh, I want to make 10 grand today. I want to get this amount of clients sign up. It's like, that's an outcome. You need to focus on the process of the thing you actually need to do. So, okay, so if I want to make 10 grand today, what ad or what thing do I need to build to then generate the lead to then do that?
Let's work backwards.
Yeah, so people need to kind of reverse engineer that back, whereas people are trying to jump to chapter 12 rather than trying to fix the problem at chapter 1.
That's a really good point. We must become obsessed with the process, not necessarily the outcome. So you were asking at the start about the podcast. I never have like a particular download figure or subscriber figure in mind. I just have weekly episode every single Sunday, 3 clips promoting it, 3 LinkedIn posts promoting it, an email promoting it, and make sure that I'm happy with the quality of the conversation, the quality of the guest, the quality of my research, the quality of my articulation and speaking and delivery on the podcast. That's the only thing that I'm focused on. That's all process driven. The outcome has been a show that's got over 330 episodes with some amazing guests on it, and people messaging me on a weekly basis about how they're impacted on it, or when I go to TKMMA, or when I go to an event in Glasgow or Mallorca, somebody comes up and says, oh, I listened to your podcast. That's fucking amazing, right? But that comes from being obsessed with the inputs and just iterating over time on the quality of those inputs, rather than being obsessed, as you say, somebody writes down their goal at the start of the day, sign up 5 clients or make 10k. That's way too outcome focused.
Now, I'm not going to sound like Stephen Bartlett, but I know a lot of people coming onto our podcast and who are not subscribing but still enjoying the content. If I have one small ask from you, is please hit the subscribe button. It'll help us a lot. I also think that's the quickest way for people to be unhappy and unfulfilled, because you can't control all the variables in that as much as you may well think you're God and you can do. But you can control what you can do on that day. And if you focus on, okay, if I've done X, Y, Z, like awesome, like whatever kind of happens. And I heard a really good YouTube video from Myron Golden. He actually talks about like why he doesn't recommend people set goals. He's like the opposite of everyone else. He's literally just do the fucking thing and just keep doing it, and eventually you kind of get what you want from it, which I kind of resonate with a lot, because I tend to set goals that are big and then I never actually hit them, but then I kind of set big goals to then make me set bigger actions to then try and chase them.
Cheesy phrase for you. So aim for the moon, you'll land among the stars. And I think that can be a helpful way of considering things. And I think James Clear had a really good contribution to the space with Atomic Habits, because he spoke about the things that we do daily compounding over time and leading to where we might get to, and also shaping your identity as well. So in the same way as your gentleman there that doesn't necessarily set goals, I think strip that back and think about what are the things that I should do every day that's going to make me 1% better across these different areas, and how will that compound to be 37x across a year. That's fantastic. I do think we must have some sort of North Star. So with the podcast, I probably could have grown it faster if I had some really aggressive metrics, but
what specifically would that have looked like?
I don't know, 10,000 subs on YouTube, or 1 million plays on an episode in across a calendar year or something like that. But if we don't know where we're aiming, sometimes we end up in another place. There's the whole airplane analogy. If it's even like 2 or 3 degrees off, it lands in like a different part of the world entirely, which is a disaster. But I think as long as your actions are relatively aligned with where you want to get to and what you want to achieve, then you're going to end up in a good position. And from a sales perspective, we can always work back from, if I want to sign 5 new clients this month, how many organic posts is that? How many paid ads is that? How many discovery meetings is that? How many proposals off the back of the discovery meeting? Because you shouldn't be giving a proposal to everyone you have the discovery meeting with, because some of them are not going to be a good fit. You can qualify as well as disqualify prospects. So how many proposals? What is the percentage close on that? And when you work back from 5 clients being signed to those metrics there, you can roughly know what good looks like in a week as well.
Do you think you can use data to master every area of your life?
I got asked this in a solo Q&A recently. We were talking about the value of doing solo episodes in the podcast, and I think they're really, really valuable. They make me reflect quite a lot, because you speak for a full hour straight, and it's a really, really reflective period. I make most of my decisions logically, but I also pay attention to my intuition. Data-wise, most people should be able to gather this quite simply, like just looking at the pros, the cons. What would look like if I did do this? What would look like if I didn't do this? What is the opportunity cost if I don't do this? Because no decision is still a decision. But intuition-wise, which can be a bit harder to do, particularly if you're a type A type person like you and I that's listening to this, or maybe a bit more relaxed, intuition is really helpful when you're in bed at night and you close your eyes and you think about, how do I feel about this decision? How's it going to make me feel? And feel's like the key thing. It's not like, what am I going to have? What am I going to experience? It's how am I going to feel about that? So if, for example, I was hosting somebody on the podcast that was a bit sus, a bit jailbait, I might look at the numbers and be like, that's going to do really good numbers. It's going to grow my subscriber base. What will happen if I do it? growth in the podcast. What will happen if I don't do it? Probably stay the same. But if I lie in bed at night, lights are off, eye mask on, maybe I'm feeling like I'm going to biohack, so I've got mouth tape on as well. And in my stomach, if I feel uncomfortable doing that, I will acknowledge that intuition and I will override the data. But logic comes first. So data plays a massive role in all areas of our life, but you also must listen to yourself. And to get really spiritual, you must listen to your soul and your spirituality at some point too.
My basic decision framework is, like, particularly from a business aspect, is I had an opportunity recently with something that was really good, but I still wasn't quite sure. I was like, if it's not a fuck yes, it's a fuck no.
That's good.
And once I said no to it, it was just like a massive relief. And I was like, the next day I was like, I'm so glad I made that decision. And also the younger version of me wouldn't have done. I would have taken the opportunity because it's another opportunity. And it's like, oh, like, I'll just take that as well. And then I'll do that. And then you're just loading yourself up more. But this is where people don't understand that everything has a cost, because you take that opportunity, it means you then can't take maybe the massive one that's coming.
It's a no to something else, Charlie. Yeah. Totally agree.
But this is also, I think, where people, whether you're saying no to the relationship, no to the job, no to the business, whatever the thing is, you saying no is actually you backing yourself to say yes to the next big thing that's coming.
Yeah. I sometimes talk about having 100 units of energy allocated across a dashboard with little knobs or dialers that you can turn up and down. And there's particular times in life where you're going to be quite imbalanced. Maybe health and fitness is at a particular level, business at a particular level, social and families at a particular level, maybe escape and plays at a particular level as well. It must balance out to 100 units, because if you go to 110, you burn out and you crash out. But making sure that you're conscious and in agreement with where those dials are at any particular time. I think too many people live on autopilot. So maybe work in business is just always at a particular level because that's what they think they should always do. But I mean, definitely, hopefully not the people listening to this. Like, health and fitness is often one that gets turned down, or actually social gets turned down. Speaking to a boy last night, he's a mortgage broker in the UK, doing about £2 million in his mortgage business, but he has a property portfolio of like 150 properties in Scotland as well, and he's always working. And I was like, mate, you're in Dubai. You need to like almost have like a holiday every weekend, because you can do that. You can go to a beach club, you can go to the Atlantis, you can go wherever, you can go to safari, whatever that looks like. And I was like, I bet you'll be more productive on the Monday if you just take one day off a week and do that as well, because his fun and social side is like basically at 0 or like 1 or 2. You'll go out for dinner like once a week. And I was like, mate, you're living in like the heart of like the most amazing place to go for dinner and go for food and meet up with different connections. Just acknowledging where those are at particular times and what's going to serve you now and into the future. And that will fluctuate across different times. I talk about, I like to live life at extremes. Like I haven't drank in a very, very long time. Not through any particular issue, but because I think it's a massive productivity tool to not be sloppy at any particular point. But I'm really, really locked in on my health, my fitness, my business, my brain, my body. But I went to Ibiza twice this summer and I was totally locked out. So I lived a life at the extremes for 3 days and I was straight back to work. And then
so you went out and you didn't drink?
I wasn't drinking, okay. But I was enjoying myself.
Okay. But that also says a lot about you, because you're also willing to stand out from the crowd, right? So I think that is an element of you creating your own version of balance, where a lot of people, as we spoke earlier about, like mimetic goals, when someone you have a goal that's not really yours because you're copying someone else's thing. Like, you still went to Ibiza and enjoyed yourself, but just because everyone else is maybe doing drugs or getting drunk doesn't mean that you have to.
Yeah. What do you want to want? And if you follow the crowd, and the crowd at the moment, if we look at the UK, the average person is overweight, unhappy, less than £1,000 in the bank. Something like 45% of people in the UK have less than £1,000 liquid in the bank.
That's why I don't run ads there as much.
Why would you? Because they're not going to want to work with you. So if you do what the average person is doing, like going out for pints every Friday, Saturday night, in a relationship you're not happy about, in a job you don't care about, where there's a particular ceiling and there's no progression, then you'll get what they have. And I think you had a phrase that we're going to talk about on my podcast: you would rather be hated than average. And I think anyone listening to that should appreciate that that's the case.
And the reason you're going to be hated if you aren't average is because you stand out. And it's like the tallest nail is the one that's going to get hammered. So it's an analogy to try and think about. And I think also, if you put yourself in an environment somewhere like the UK, is where you can end up getting hammered. I remember before I moved here, someone said to me, I was in the process of kind of going back and forth. I went back into the gym I trained in the UK, and someone said to me, "Oh, you're back here slumming it with us now." I was like, this is exactly why I'm fucking leaving, because like people's attitude,
what a horrible attitude.
I was literally like, and it kind of really stuck out to me. And one of the things I've really noticed now living here a while is that if you you don't really get exposed to negativity and small-mindedness. Everyone's very supportive, and if someone's doing better than you're like, oh, that's sick, and like everyone just wants to kind of lift each other up. If you see the opposite, it stands out so much now, like a red rag to a bull. You just want to kind of pull yourself away from it.
It's the same as the safety thing in the UK just now as well. So here you're so safe. So I left my stuff at Expectation at JBR and went to walk along the beach, left my laptop, left my bag. I had no concerns. When you go to the UK, you are on edge. You go to the toilet, you take your laptop from in the cafe to the toilet with you because you don't trust that it's going to still be there when you come back. So the difference is so stark. In the same way, the attitude around growth and business, even health, how many people are like, don't get too thin, don't get too muscular, you're a bit obsessed with that. That is so negative. Whereas here, people are like, that's amazing, what do you do? Or how have you done that? Or who have you worked with to achieve that? Or like, who can I introduce you? Or like, actually, you should speak to my friend such and such who's doing this. It's more abundant and encouraging rather than self-limiting, self-loathing and scarce.
If someone says you're obsessed about something, it's one of the best compliments anyone can ever say, because that's how you become phenomenal at it. If you can do the obsessed thing and then do what you've done with like a podcast every week for the last 5 years, however long it is, that's when you start to crush. And I think that trying to pull away from an obsession mentality is why we have people, everyone has an average mentality.
Yeah, the obsession thing's funny. A girl I was dating recently, she asked me if I have an obsessive or addictive personality. And I said, I haven't got any massive vices, so I don't think like gambling, drinking, like any mad stuff. But stuff that I really care about, I really put my all into it because it feels good to do it. It's actually really funny. Like I'm not a great golfer. I'm a reasonable golfer. I play off 8. But one of my friends was like, let's play paddle. And I was like, I don't play paddle. And he was like, why? And I was like, because I won't be good at it. And if I started playing, I would have to make time for it. So I'd have to fuck off playing as much golf. And I was like, there's no way I'm not going to play as much golf because I like playing golf and I'm good at golf. I go to the gym, I'm good at the gym. In the same way people are like, let's do a high rocks doubles. I was like, no mate, I'll just be like lean and jack, don't worry about it. Like I'm not that fussed. Like I actually did start running 5Ks for a bit and I got quite fast. I ran like a 20 minutes, 30-second 5K, and somebody was like, you never even run. And I was like, I just focused on it for like 3 weeks and got like all right at it, which is quite funny. But when you have like a personality that enjoys progress, and Tony Robbins has got a quote, progress is happiness, and I definitely believe that we want to be moving towards something. It's when we're stagnating, we're dying. So if I recognize my own personality traits and I recognize how I'm wired, I put myself into a smaller number of domains but really deep. So narrow but deep, not wide and shallow. Like I'm not a polymath, I'm not an expert at everything. Now I've learned loads across the podcast and it's kind of forced self-development to be ready to have a conversation with different people across different business areas, different approaches to things. But I would much rather be really knowledgeable and skilled and good at a particular few things rather than be seen as like a jack of all trades, master of none.
Interesting question for you. Have you ever done a ocean personality test?
I've not done the ocean personality test. I've done the disc personality test, and I've done Jordan Peterson's Understand Me as well.
Yeah, Jordan Peterson's one's good.
What? Why?
The reason why I asked that is I found as soon as I did that, I was like, well, that entire thing.
It all makes sense.
Yeah, literally, I was like, well, that's kind of like bang on. But also, it was like, you mentioned obsession, like it was extremes. Things were like, it was literally 100 and 0. It's like my agreeableness was like 0. It's like, and I was like, okay.
That's a very masculine trait as well, though.
Yeah, but I think that's also where.
Well, you and I spoke about the whole C19 period. We're both very disagreeable, so we weren't swept along by the masks or the quote unquote vaccine because we were disagreeable. And if more people had been disagreeable, we wouldn't have ended up in the shit show we were in.
Well, I also think if more people were disagreeable in the UK wouldn't be such a shithole as it is at the moment. If you look at why the US has kind of pivoted from the precipice, is because they have a lot more people there who are more disagreeable, willing to stand up for what they believe in. They have guns
as well, which definitely helps.
Yeah, that kind of probably alters the perspective. But I think from the personality test, I think one of the big things that you can do is start to manage yourself better. So for me, I was like, I kind of think about it when I'm making decisions, or I don't know, maybe I get fucked off or something, like I just want to make a rash decision. I'm like, okay, you need to kind of like calm down and rein it in, and you understand your own weaknesses as well as your strengths.
There's a book I'll recommend to listeners, and he's been on the podcast. His name's Thomas Erickson. His book's called Surrounded by Idiots, and it's all about the disc personality. So yellow, green, red, blue, and you can do your own test, but then understanding how other personality types are wired as well. So from a sales perspective, that's really helpful. If I deal with a finance director or a managing director, they're typically red, blue. So red is very like authoritative, fast, speed. Finance directors are all blue. They love data. They love numbers. They fucking have wanks over spreadsheets. Like, that's how you need to speak to those particular individuals. Whereas sometimes you deal with like an HR director, they tend to be quite yellow, quite green. They're very like people led, very
Passive,
very connective led, very and easily led or influenced, but in the right way, as long as they feel like they're part of the journey. So speaking to people in a different way. And I'm sure some of the coaches will have jumped on particular calls and their client avatar may be a particular way, but we must be, while still being authentic and a real self, we must be a bit of a chameleon to meet people where they are so that we can service them best. There'll be people you serve better because of how you deal with them. Like, I know that from any coaching or mentorship that I've invested in, I like somebody to be quite red, quite like fast, straight to the point. I want to come off a call and have actions to take. I don't want them to be like, Colin, I want you to read these 3 chapters and then summarize it and send it back to me and then we'll build your action plan. I'm like, no mate, you're the boss. Tell me what are 3 things that I can do to improve my brain, my body, my business, whatever it is I've been trying to work on. And I think recognizing that in yourself can help both deal with others, but also get the best from you too.
I think when you say one of the things there as well, is where most people going wrong in life is the speed of action they just take with everything. So like, money loves speed, poverty loves indecision. The reason most people in the UK have less than £1,000 in their bank accounts can't make a fucking decision, which is why they're still in the job they hate, they're still out of shape, they're still X, Y, Z. And I think that's where, if you can pick up the ability to make decisions quickly and be decisive, even if you make mistakes, you can then learn and then try the next thing and just keep taking swings and eventually kind of win.
I had a clip go quite viral on TikTok, and TikTok's a bit of a sewer because a lot of people on the app are deeply, deeply unhappy, and I try not to argue with them in the comments because when you're rolling around in the mud, the pigs like it. But I had a quote that I was saying that a lot of people flex, like I read 52 books this year, I read a book a week. And I would say for a lot of people that's intellectual masturbation because they've spent so much time reading and consuming, but how much time have they spent actioning? So I've read a lot of books this year, maybe not a lot of books, I've read maybe 6 or 7 books this year, and it's all been for guests that have been coming on the podcast. So I was like almost forced to read the book, so I was ready to have the conversation with them, which was great. But I have action points from all those books. So who won? Me that read 6 or 7 books and have action points and have changed things in my life, or the person that read 52 books and couldn't tell me a single thing from it? In fact, I've read Atomic Habits 3 times. Now somebody else will be like, oh, but I've read 2 other books than you, so I've learned more than you. Have you actually though? Because in terms of behavior change, identity, how I show up and how I behave, I've become someone with a level of mastery in that. And I would much prefer that than somebody that has just read really broadly and can't necessarily point to a single thing and do in their life differently off the back of reading that book.
Well, they've just been entertained, not educated. And I think one of the big things is actually sick when you have a podcast. So a phenomenal book I'd highly recommend is called The Way of Men, about masculinity. There's also got another book called The Way of the Barbarian. Now, if you have a podcast, this is phenomenal. I read the book, this is sick. I was like, I'm going to message Jack Donovan, the author, and then got him on my podcast and got to ask him questions for an hour. So it's like, that's also where when you start to build these assets, you can then kind of get free time with these people.
Oh, Thomas Erickson's never coming on an hour Zoom call with me unless I'm putting out to a couple thousand listeners at the time, back in like 2022.
So I also did another podcast recently with Charles Marden, who owns like Ultraflex gyms or other type of stuff. And one of the things he said was that the problem is when you have a certain amount of success, like you can't actually pay people to learn from them because they don't need the money. I was like, that's why we're sitting here. So it's like, you can start to build these things if you think intentionally in terms of what you want. How much do you think the value of network is going to be valued over the next few years?
Yeah, so we're talking about podcasting. I think podcasting is massive for your personal brand, your content strategy, your network, and a funnel for whatever business or offering that you've got as well. The network strand's unbelievable. So you and I now have each other's phone number. You both know what each other do. We know what we stand for. We get on a number of different principles. If you ask me for an introduction from somebody from my network, it's going to be a yes. If I ask somebody for an introduction from you already tried to introduce me to Jordan Lee, who we'll try and have on the podcast when I'm out here. That's a huge tool. And again, in an age where we're more connected than ever, but we're more lonely than ever, having a proper network that you build through meeting people that you resonate with online, or meeting people that you resonate that maybe have similar activities to you, whether it's a run club, a gym you go to, a yoga class, a Pilates class, a mentorship that you're a part of, that everyone else is striving towards the same goal, then I think that's going to be massive, because you can lean on these people, you can learn bits and pieces from them, and if it sometimes brings it into reality what's possible as well. So if you're in a mentorship, and some of the figures you speak about are incredible, so you've got several coaches doing £100,000 a month. If somebody joins doing 10 grand, they can see somebody who isn't that different to them. Maybe they've done a few different things, You can get there if you do those same things over time consistently and you iterate on that process as you go. So network is massive for that sort of thing, as well as, of course, actually having connection, because I think we can all spend too much time sitting in our living rooms looking at our phone or sat in front of the TV.
That's also why, in my opinion, the biggest needle mover for many people in their business, their brand, is going to be actual in-person events, because people want to be around other people, because we are so disenchanted, in my opinion, from the dancing reels and the bullshit online, that you actually want to see Charlie, Colin, whoever in person and actually see their human. Like, even I did a webinar earlier in the week, and there was like 150 people there, and one of my team was on. He was like, "That was really good because it actually just showed you're human." Because like, just kind of fuck around a bit on the Zoom call or like whatever and have kind of a bit of a laugh. I think that's where like that human element is what people miss so much, and also the value again of like kind of long form.
Yeah, definitely. I think where everything's becoming AIfied, you can't fake an hour webinar. You can't fake a meet and greet event that you run at a gym or at a facility where you're delivering value for several hours. And that's what people are going to benefit from far more than just the content. Like, all the free content you put on your Spotify, YouTube's absolutely amazing, but it leads and ascends towards more access to you, more support from you, and more impact from you down the line too.
You're here in Dubai, you travel quite a lot. Do you think the UK is in a position now where you see the contrast from Dubai to the UK? My personal opinion is probably not going to be many people left in the UK to actually even fund the UK from a tax perspective. Do you think this is a ship that can be stopped sinking?
I studied politics at University of Glasgow between 2010 and 2014. So I've got a master's in politics, which some of the listeners will know if you've come across from my show, but if you're new to me through Charlie, then that's my background. I became quite politically disengaged from about 2016 onwards. I knew that I would vote at the ballot box typically Conservative because I don't like what the Labour Party stand for, and we're seeing that unfold in front of our very eyes just now. But I'm also now politically homeless from the Conservative Party, because what they did under Boris Johnson from 2019 to 2024 was completely out of alignment with what the Conservative Party was meant to be standing for. We had higher unfettered immigration, we had higher taxes, we had lower safety, we had more punitive taxes on entrepreneurs, and Labour have just done that but on steroids and much faster. So the UK is on a really shockingly poor trajectory. You mentioned that people are fleeing the UK. It is literally a case of productive people versus unproductive people. The stuff they're doing with the benefits, removing the 2-child cap, having thousands of undocumented military males come into the UK and being supported by the taxpayer as well, is just an affront to the situation as well. As that starts to happen, the fiscal balancing act is just getting so out of whack, as you said. So the tax base is being eroded because 9,500 millionaires left the UK last year. It'll be more than that this year, but it's not
16,000 this year. So it's increased 60% in 12 months.
Okay, so that's shocking. But what's even more shocking is that the future millionaires are leaving as well. So my friends that are in good corporate jobs, maybe they're on 60 to 100 grand, and they're going to be somebody that's going to be a director of a company in the future. They're going to be a business owner. They're going to be a high flyer in law, accountancy, real estate, insurance, whatever sector. They're also leaving. That means that in 10 years' time, there's not going to be as many millionaires that are even up and running, or they're going to build their millions or build their fortune in another jurisdiction and pay tax in that jurisdiction. So the real problem from that perspective. Politically, I have recently platformed Darren Grimes from the Reform Party. I've platformed Andrew Wade, who's from a conservative think tank, or a conservative thinking think tank, he's not Conservative Party, called Logical Politics. There are minds and voices in the UK who are speaking common sense, and there isn't the delta between what the average person on the street in the UK thinks and what the politicians are implementing just now. There are more politicians that are aligned to that. The challenge will be, if we do get Reform government, hopefully in 2029, potentially before that if the Labour Party fall apart before that. The challenge is the bureaucracy behind that, the civil service, the judiciary, and the working bodies within that will block some of the policy change. So some of the mass deportations, some of the changes to the tax structure, some of the changes to the education system, so they stop teaching some of the satanic agenda that's been enforced into the schools. Like you recently become a father, Charlie. Yeah. You would not want your kid going to a UK public school because you would have very little control over what they get taught in that school, whereas in Dubai your kid's not going to be taught any nonsense whatsoever. In fact, they're going to be educated to be a real high flyer. So the challenge is, the UK is a project worth saving. I'm deeply patriotic, I'm proudly British, I'm proudly Scottish, but if we do get political change, it's going to take time to reverse that, and the damage being done just now is so catastrophic. Things can happen fast, things can happen quickly, but it's going to take a lot to turn the boat around, and we need all the best minds, speakers and thinkers, business owners to be involved in the government, not just to be career politicians that are there, because I don't trust career politicians.
Well, they've never... It's like you're trying to teach the thing without doing the thing.
It's like the business teacher at university.
Too, like I got in trouble at school with that one. So I think the reality is like you're trying to turn around a freight ship. So it's going to take 20 to 30 years. But the problem is that even reform comes in, whoever comes in, then they're out 3 years, and fucking Labour, whoever's back, and then you're back in... This is why Dubai has moved forward so quickly, is because they have one agenda and then they just send it as quickly as possible.
Democracy is the best of the worst options, but Dubai shows that you can have a benevolent dictator. Dictator, you probably wouldn't like that title, but you can have a benevolent person in charge who wants the best for the country. Interestingly, we were at dinner last night, my friend that's in real estate, he was saying that Dubai, one of the challenges for a lot of people moving out here was the rent of like either 6 months or a year up front, but they've listened, and from next year people can then pay monthly, because it's a city that listens to what people want from an experience perspective and then implements what's going to make it better. In the UK, we feed back on what we would like to be changed, and then we're told, no, that's some sort of racism or transphobism or bigotry, and you're like, oh my goodness, I just want that. Or greed. Oh, you want to pay less tax? Yes, please, because how you spend it is absolutely appalling. So it's in stark contrast where you watch a city that does everything it can to make the user experience and the person that lives here and the residents' experience better, versus the UK, where they actively try to undermine the productive population for the benefit of the unproductive, lazy, feckless, unemployable, and don't wish to be employed population.
I think the problem with this, though, is it's the compound effect of the generations who are now growing up in that, which then... how you undo that is that's a 50 to 100 year timeline, because it's generations of, trying to use a polite word, of uneducated people who aren't going to do anything, who've been necessarily...
It's really dangerous.
Poor role models as well, if that makes sense.
I actually think technology could help with that, because I've watched 2 families homeschool their kid and use technology sparingly but consciously. And their kid is way ahead of the age that they would be at in school based on the exams that they're going to be able to sit. And you can still do that through the government bodies. You can still sit examinations even though your kid's homeschooled, so you still get the same qualifications and get into whatever university you want to and stuff like that. Although university is a topic for another day, Charlie. We don't have 3 hours to get into what on earth they've done to the university system in the UK. But they've used technology really consciously to rewire that child's abilities and skill set and their mindset. I think if we can start to implement technology into the schools properly, we could turn the boat round faster in terms of getting people more motivated, more stimulated, more encouraged. And that probably comes from, say, a reform government coming in and then involving the likes of business leaders across different spaces. So I had a guy, Andrew Wade, in the podcast from Logical Politics. He's an expert in manufacturing. He had like 8 or 9 different ideas that he was like, this would massively help the British economy. It would help the British workforce. And I was like, you're just one person from manufacturing. Why don't we get somebody from tech? Why don't we get somebody from finance? Why don't we get somebody from whatever other sector, like energy? Let's get somebody in each of those areas, rather than these career politicians who are ideologically compromised with what they want to do to the UK. And I think things could move round, but it's going to take a hell of a lot of will and a hell of a lot of grit and determination.
You mentioned current politicians being kind of ideologically warped. Why do you think that is?
I think there's an element of like holier than thou. Like, I'm better than you, I'm cleverer than you. So controversially, whether you like this or not, I was very in favour of Brexit. I believe that...
I agree. So I was saying.
So
I think the UK should be kind of, fuck you to the rest of the world. We were the most powerful force in the world.
100%. Like, we civilised the entire world, mate. 100% right.
We should do again.
And in terms of democratically, I didn't have a lot of say over who was going to Brussels and Strasbourg to make decisions. Whereas, while democracy is pretty flawed, I can vote at the ballot box for who goes to the Scottish Parliament. I can vote at the ballot box who stands in my council, and I can vote at the ballot box for who stands at Westminster for the UK Parliament. I couldn't control a lot of what was happening in the EU because all these other countries were voting and then overruling what the UK wanted. That's a shambles. So I wanted out of that. I wanted us to be autonomous. I don't believe in a lot of these supranational organisations, the UN, the WEF, the WHO. Look at how they managed the C-19 pandemic, and that tells you everything you need to know. So when it comes to stuff like that, the political will of the politicians to implement Brexit was not there. That's why Brexit turned into not what we particularly voted for. We're actually still in what's called the EHRC, which is the European Convention of Human Rights, which means that we can't deport these terrorists. There's 41,000, same size as some small football stadiums or mid-sized Premier League football stadiums, jihadis on a watch list in the UK, and we're not deporting them. Now we live in
and we're probably funding them as well.
Yeah, 100%. We are in an incredible Muslim country. They wouldn't accept these people. Like, if they tried to come to Dubai, these jihadis would not be allowed in. Like, you're not allowed to go these crazy marches in Dubai. Have you ever seen anyone waving that flag here? Absolutely not. It's not allowed. Whereas in London, they paraded through the streets for weeks calling for the death of Jews and stuff like that. It was absolutely unacceptable. And when you look at what the politicians did with Brexit, that's my concern. If reform get in, that the powers that be that sit behind the scenes that are unelected, they try and kibosh and they try and stop stuff.
And I think there's probably a lot more of those powers that be than people kind of realise, just blocking things.
Yeah, so much red tape.
It's
That's why the NHS is so fucked. There's so many middle managers in there that are earning a fortune that are just total pen pushers.
But it's also ultimately why public sector doesn't work. Everything needs to be privatised because everything needs to be run like a business, and the government is completely incompetent. And that's why, like, the 45% of GDP of the UK is the British government.
Yeah,
so the
Daniel Priestley's been creating great content on this, hasn't he?
The British government is the economy. So, like, that's where the whole thing doesn't make sense. It's like a giant Ponzi scheme. And I think that's where the whole thing is a stack of cards. It's also, economically, it's now getting to the point where the amount of national debt versus interest that needs to be paid, it's getting to the point that the UK is going to collapse because it can't actually even afford to pay the interest.
Interestingly, the US is actually in an even worse spot when it comes to national debt, but they're going to grow their way out of it. And that's what Trump came in to try and do. I think if Kamala got in, it was the end of the Western world as we know it. And I think even more of us would be in Dubai off the back of that.
I had a controversial idea the other day, and I've never heard anyone ever say this. Everyone says before. Would you be open to the United States making the UK another state of the US? As a British citizen, I would actually be happy for that.
You'd consider it.
And
okay, only because Trump would be our president, but no, because the UK is, for a tiny little island with shitty weather and a bit of a bitter attitude, we had such a big impact on the world. And if anything, the Americans should come back under our jurisdiction and stop being traitors like they were on Independence Day. But no, I think politically I would much rather somebody who thinks like Trump, who acts like Trump, who conducts himself like Trump, than what we have in the UK. I hope Farage does the business, but I think the likes of a Ben Habib with advance is actually probably closer to what we might want in terms of political will and political opinions. But the UK should stand as its own entity and should be a force for good, for growth, and for Judeo-Christian values in the west of the world. And we've fallen away so far from that for such a long time.
So you mentioned their Christian values. Almost saying that in the UK is not a politically correct thing to say.
It's mental. Like, how bad is that? It's a Christian country. They rebranded a Christmas light switch on as a festive light switch on. And I was like, in Dubai, we have Christmas trees, and this is a Muslim country, and we have tremendous respect for our Muslim hosts here because we respect their religion, they respect ours if we choose to practice it. In the UK, they're like, oh, Christmas might offend some of the population. If they're offended, they can fuck off home. Like, you're a guest here and you will behave accordingly. It's the exact same in Dubai. If I came and disrespected the culture here, I would be on the first flight out of here, or I'd be in jail. And rightly so. We should have respect for the people who built this country, who make it the amazing place it is, and it's the exact same for the UK. So when you see people being derogatory towards Christianity, I've got a real problem with it, and I think that Christianity has been far too soft for too long. It's kind of turned the other cheek, as the Bible would say, and just allowed it to be slapped around, and that's a terrible position to be in because Christian values are really positive values. I consider myself culturally Christian, and I consider the values that I learned going to Sunday school as a little boy, albeit I don't have an active faith just now, although interestingly, a few of my friends have started going back to church and they've spoken about how much it's made them feel better, that there's something above them, and it can sometimes help when you're running your own business that you feel there's maybe something bigger than you, maybe a mentor, not God, a mentor. So I hope the UK gets back to more of its Christian values, and I hope it's unapologetic in doing so, even if that doesn't mean that numbers at church surge, which they actually are, interestingly enough.
It's interesting you say that, because I was going to bring that up, that I've noticed a big resurgence in friends my age who are like mid-30s who are now suddenly starting to become religious, so that's the correct political term to say that, which I think is also where people have probably been pushed so far one way they almost want to go the other way.
The pendulum always swings back. No, I appreciate when I see their content, and I think it makes them better people, typically. Like a lot of people, when they find God and they reconnect with it, it makes them more supportive, more caring, more helpful, but also firmer in what they stand for. And I think that's the element of Christianity that we need in the UK. We need to be a bit firmer about our cultures and values.
But if you look at the US, that I think predominantly is why their values are the way they are.
So,
Because they are much more traditionally religious than we are as Brits.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think it's why they're firmer as well. They don't accept their texts or their culture being pissed and shat all over, whereas in the UK we seem to like lie down and accept it and almost enjoy it.
Do you think that business owners in the UK are being persecuted right now?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's by design. If they can force more people out that are productive and have high agency, then they'll have a more docile, subservient population that will accept the likes of digital ID, a social credit score, universal basic income, all these totalitarian control measures, which will be wrapped up as convenience, support, and help, but will ultimately be a prison, which will stop people from having the freedom and control and agency over their life that they want. So business owners are some of the few people that would resist that sort of nonsense. And if less of them are around, or less of them feel like they have a voice, then Labour, and in particular the Green Party, people must not mistake what I would call a wolf in sheep's clothing, the Green Party. Oh, they're so soft and friendly. No, they're not. They have communist principles at their very, very core, and they've got some really peculiar policies. The one I won't speak about in this podcast, but we'll speak about it afterwards, Charlie, because it's generally satanic. If business owners flee and leave, then it makes the UK easier to control and enforce the totalitarian agenda.
Is that because the strong have left and the weak are left there to then manipulate, essentially?
Yeah, definitely. And people who are reliant on the state will do as the state tells them. So if you are, and interestingly enough, people are in what I call a benefit trap. So low paid earners, say 25k and below, they don't want to earn any more because they go into an upper tax bracket, and then they also lose maybe their housing credit, their child credit, or some sort of credit that they get which allows them to support their life. So basically they turn down hours in their workplace, or they turn down a promotion, or they turn down progression within their career because they're trapped, reliant on the state. Those people will, when the UK state says jump, they'll say how high, because they're reliant on them for money, whereas most business owners are not reliant on the state or the government to be paying their house, their car, the ability for them to have any expendable income.
Now, the majority of our listeners are in the UK. What would be your advice to them to kind of finish up on in terms of how to stay positive and still be successful in maybe a more challenging environment compared to other places?
You have so much agency and control, regardless of what Rachel from Accounts, or Rachel Thieves, as my mum recently called her, and Keir Starmer did. There is so much that you can control. You can control the content you consume, the food you eat, the training you do, the quality of your sleep and your recovery, your supplementation, the impact and positive impact that your business has, because as a fitness business owner, you can have a tremendously positive impact on people's physical and mental well-being. We all know that when we make a physical transformation, typically our mental health follows that. The mind follows the body is something that a neuroscientist who's been on my podcast, TJ Power, always talks about, and it's a very Andrew Huberman sort of idea as well. You can absolutely control how you show up online, the offering you've got, the quality of your service and the delivery on that as well. In terms of like staying positive from like a political perspective, have conversations like the one that you and I are having, and don't be afraid to be shouted down as a racist, a bigot, a transphobe, any of the different labels that they're going to throw at you, because those are designed to shut you up. So if you don't believe that a man should be changing in a women's space, call it out. Don't be afraid to be called a transphobe, because that's not transphobic, that's just common sense, and it's protecting women's spaces. If you don't believe that a male boxer should be able to go in the ring and punch a female boxer around that happened at the Olympics, speak about it. Don't be afraid of what that means as well. If you believe that 40 people from a country that does not share our values, does not share our outlook on life, should be housed in the house, and you don't believe they should be housed in the door next to you, and they're all military-aged men with no documentation, with no idea of their criminal record and their background, that is not racist. Don't be afraid to say that. So say that to your friends, say that to your neighbours, because that is the only way that those views become more mainstream and accepted, and not something that's kind of said in the back room of a pub or in the football changing room. Say them publicly, speak about them, and then look for groups, like-minded individuals, communities, political parties you can vote for which reflect your views, not those of which you feel you disagree with.
I think it's a very powerful thing to finish on. So big thank you for your time today. Everyone enjoyed the podcast. Make sure you smash subscribe, leave us a review, and make sure you check out Colin's podcast as well.
Cheers, Charlie. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. That's great, dude. Thank you.